Call the meeting to order here. Can I get a motion, please, that the agenda for June 14th, 2022 committee of the whole meeting be adopted with the addition of sundry item G1 FCM conference reporting.
Along with your additions.
Councilor Schneider to make that. All in favor? Opposed? That is passed.
You also have Councilor Taylor on the screen.
Yeah, and he had his hand up there. Motion at the agenda for June 14th. Oh, just a minute, no. Oh, come on, over here.
Use your paper ones.
Motion at the meeting of May 10th, 2022 committee of the whole meeting be adopted as presented.
I'll move the minutes as presented.
All in favor? Opposed? That is passed. We have no delegations tonight. Reports from staff. Infrastructure and Planning Municipal Energy Manager Program Year 2 Progress Update presented by Brendan Riom, Municipal Energy Coordinator. Welcome, sir.
Okay, thank you. 2 weeks in a row, good shirt. This is good.
And I handed out more grapes than you did strawberries.
We're more aggressive with some now.
Those can share this.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, perfect. Thanks everyone for having me tonight. So I am going to be presenting on the program progress to date for the Municipal Energy Manager Program for the town of Edson. So we're going to go over some goals of the program, progress we've made to date, some grant funding initiatives we've pursued, and then additional initiatives that we have in progress outside the scope of the program. So going to the program goals. So main goal of the program was to incorporate energy management and sustainability into town operations, which we've been diligently doing over the past nearly 2 years of this program. And the main pieces that we were looking at on top of that was to achieve an additional 5% greenhouse gas emissions reduction in 2022. And this was a motion that was passed by council on December 17th, 2021, I believe. And this 5% greenhouse gas emissions reduction target is in addition to the 2021 target of the 79 ton reduction. So by the end of 2022, there'll be an additional 132 tons emissions reduction on top of that 79 ton reduction. So about 211 tons in total. So to achieve these goals, I've made significant progress to date within the program. So we started off in 2021 with 7 buildings in the portfolio, as you can see on the left-hand side of the screen here. And in 2022, we added in 3 additional facilities. So the wastewater treatment plant, the airport, and the landfill. And to get a baseline of what our emissions were, we categorize all the energy consumption and emissions from all these buildings to get our emissions portfolio from 2019 onwards. And we use 2019 as our baseline for the program because that was the last year that we had as normal operations in our facilities prior to COVID. So in 2019, we were nearly 2,800 tons of emissions from those 10 buildings. And emissions went down in 2021 and 2020 just due to COVID and shutdowns that we had as part of that. Now with the work that we've done so far in the program, we're expecting emissions to continue to go down in 2022 based on the energy conservation measures we've put into place over the past part of the program. And we should note that the 10 buildings that we're looking at as part of this program is only a small fraction of the total building portfolio that the town owns and operates. There's about 53 utility accounts and facilities that we operate in addition to the fleet. So we've only scratched the surface of what work can be done in the energy management and environmental sustainability work for the town. As I mentioned, we have gotten some energy conservation measures from the facilities that we've looked into. So I've completed energy audits in all 10 facilities and identified 264 energy conservation measures from those facilities. To date, including 2021 and 2022, I've completed 68 energy conservation measures, either through small projects that I've managed or collaborative efforts between myself, building operators, and other staff members in those facilities. in 2022 alone, I've completed 24 measures. With the completed energy conservation measures to date, we will see an annual emissions reduction of about 173 tons and a projected avoided utility costs of about just over $38,000 just from those measures completed to date. Additional major projects that I have in progress. I am managing 3 capital projects related to energy conservation. So a boiler retrofit in the Civic Center, as well as controls upgrades to make the system run more smoothly, and lighting retrofits in the Civic Center and Public Works. As well, in addition to that, I'm working on 2 minimum rate reviews for 2 facilities in the town portfolio. So what that is reviewing with Fortis the minimum demand contract for our electricity and finding ways to reduce that and lower our transmission and distribution charges for those buildings. So with all these projects that we have on the go and all the energy conservation measures completed to date, it's projected that by the end of 2022, our annual emissions reduction will be about 221 tons. So that's in excess of the 211 tons that was targeted for the program. And projected avoided annual utility costs from these efforts will be around $93,000 per year. And the asterisk on this is to indicate that that is on an annualized basis, where a lot of these initiatives are being implemented part of the way through the year. So we won't see the full effect of that until at least a year after they've been initiated. Another big piece that I've been working on with other departments is grant funding. So we pursued multiple avenues for grant funding since the beginning of this program, and a total of $323,000 in grant funding has been secured both directly and indirectly through the Municipal Energy Manager Program. The largest of which is the $160,000, which is a wage subsidy for my position as the Municipal Energy Coordinator for the town. Other grants that we've secured is construction grants for Griffiths Park for the lighting and the HVAC upgrades, and that was done in collaboration with Community Services. There's a small grant from Fortis Alberta for energy conservation upgrades in some of our buildings. And the most recent one that we received was from the Municipal Climate Change Action Center for $80,000 as part of their climate resiliency capacity building program. There's also some additional grant funding that we are pursuing, and there's 3 of them currently at a total of value of $185,000. So there's two grants from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. The first one being an asset management grant for a condition assessment of our stormwater system that I'm pursuing with Mr. Fisher and Jeff Fan, as well as a recommissioning grant that I'm collaborating with the Leisure Center manager and Mr. Beck on to extend the life of some equipment in the Leisure Center until we've completed the construction of the new facility. And I'm also targeting a second application to the Climate Resiliency Capacity Building Program early next year that will support some work that goes beyond the additional work for the first application. And it should be noted that for a lot of grant funding that's out there right now at the federal or provincial level, climate assessments and an environmental lens is being required. And that it's simply becoming a matter of course for these grants, showing either what the emissions reductions are, what potential energy reductions are for those projects, or climate resiliency and adaptation is becoming a big part of these grants. We have to be able to demonstrate that it's a core part of what we're doing as part of projects now. Some further initiatives that I'm looking at outside of the scope of the Municipal Energy Manager Program is completing a total energy emissions and cost inventory for all town utility accounts and assets. As I mentioned, this program so far has only been looking at a small section of assets that the town owns. We do have a lot more buildings to look at. We have a large fleet that can be assessed. There's a lot more work that can be done. But initially, we're looking into doing some benchmarking of some high priority assets and properties, specifically in the water system for our wells and degas plants, things like that. And we're in the initial stages of completing a review of the town's utility accounts, which Ms. Bittner and I have started with the application of the Power Plus. We've been able to do some work identifying some accounts that can be amalgamated into our larger account with AV Muni. And the second initiative that we've started on, this was fully funded by the Climate Resiliency Capacity Building Program through the Municipal Climate Change Action Center is a climate risk assessment for Edson area. And this is an assessment that will look at how climate change will affect the community, infrastructure, and other assets over the course of the next 20, 30, 50, 80 years, and show how precipitation changes, how temperature variations will change the environment around us, which would be very valuable in planning infrastructure projects, planning facilities, and just any action that we want to take as a municipality. So that was just a very high level view of the progress to date on this, so open the floor for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Earl. Any questions from council? Councilor Schnard.
Okay, thanks for your report. The one thing that always confuses me on this is when they always say in tones. Do you have the mathematical equation to figure out what a ton of gas is? Like when you said you're saving. So what do they use to figure this out?
Yes, so the government of Alberta publishes a guidebook for emissions inventory accounting. And the most recent one, I believe, was released in 2018. And for any provincial reporting, you're required to use that methodology, and those, they're called emissions intensities. So for every kilowatt hour of electricity, there's a certain emissions impact from that. The same for every gigajoule of natural gas, and that's provincially mandated based on what energy intensity of the grid.
So in other words, it's based on your consumption, which would give you that. If I can do one follow-on.
Good follow.
The other one we talked about, because we're roofs, have we looked at putting possible solar powers on our buildings for savings? Is there any grants for that?
The most major grants for those ones were from the Municipal Climate Change Action Center, and they just stopped intake for that about 6 months ago. So we're kind of in an in-between point for solar grants at the moment. It is, we are looking at it as a long-term plan after we get some other pieces in order on our utilities accounts.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Taylor, go ahead.
Through the chair to Mr. Riom, thank you so much for this presentation. As always, it's great that see the work that you're doing. I love the cost savings, and of course, I love the saving on the impact on the environment. Just one question on just the future initiatives that you might be looking at. Are you hoping to maybe engage, or what your ideas are in terms of engaging with schools come in the fall and in the winter time? I know we'd spoken formally about it, but wondering what your thoughts, or do you have any ideas in terms of engaging students in schools in the future?
Through the chair, Councilor Taylor. There's no set plan for that sort of engagement as of yet. With the climate risk assessment we're looking at, there will be some public engagement involved in that. So there is an opportunity to get involved with the school systems and stakeholders in that space.
Any other questions? Mayor Zahar?
Yeah, through the chair, Mr. Riom, thank you very much for your presentation, and I think you have shown what kind of an asset you are to the town of Edson, so really appreciate that. Looks like there's about $500,000 worth of money that you brought into our community to help, and that's money that other communities are leaving on the table, so I appreciate that. And I know that there's still a lot of commentary out there about climate change and whether or not it's real or not. Whether you believe it or not, these are the realities we're dealing with right now, and we see that with our fluctuations in weather and changing situations. And by the work you're doing, you're allowing us to move forward on a number of different projects where climate change is a central aspect of that. So I want to thank you for that, as well as your interaction with Youth Council. You've been there quite a bit. They're very interested in environmental issues, and it ties nicely to our strategic plan as well.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I just have to say that when you were doing your live stream there at one time, got a lot of comments that the people that were able to get into it, they really liked it. And I know people have missed it, and if they would do it again, there'd be more people that would very like to be able to tune in and see what's going in. They were very, very interested on it. So
Yeah, definitely.
it was well worth it. So thank you very much. No other questions? Councilor Taylor, you okay? Okay, moving on then. Snow and Ice Control Service Policy Review, presented by Clayton Kidlitz, General Manager, Infrastructure and Planning, and Pat Fisher, Senior Manager, Infrastructure. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, good presentation prepared tonight. Really, it's just a summary of what's in the briefing note that was presented in preparation for tonight's meeting as a whole. So I will run through that, and Mr. Fisher will be here to supplement and answer any real tough questions that I would be able to. So as council is aware, we were in front of council in February with this policy, but the existing policy is February 2020 policy that was amended by council on February 1st of 2022. And what we heard from council is they wanted to increase the threshold from 5 centimeters, sorry, in excess of 5 centimeters to in excess of 10 centimeters. So that was a policy change that was done earlier this year. During that presentation, we promised that we would come back to council at some point in the summer to talk about lessons learned from the season, how the policy held out, and some of the things that we might recommend in terms of enhancements to that policy, and maybe use control in town. So the lens that we use to do this analysis is we spent a lot of time talking to the actual men and women that actually do this work. Operational efficiency is one of the things we wanted to look at, what worked well in the field, what wasn't, equipment, how that was performing, where some of the gaps were there, and some of the future requirements that we might be considering, staffing, current state, the constraints that we see in staffing this year. There's a lot of talk from the operations side about clarity. We met with them about 3 or 4 times going through this stuff. And one of the things that came up at one point, you'll see this in the draft policy, but that clarity comes, one of the questions they asked was, what's the expectation for a cleared road, right? Is it black pavement or is it a skip of snow? And things like this were really important to them. So these are some of the things we tried to add into the policy to try to get that clarity so that the expectations for the level of service is clear to everybody. It's in defining the roles and responsibilities as well. Some other things that we looked at, obviously, were financial. Off-street parking, the existing policy does address that. I know that previously there was a stronger hand taken with on-street parking stuff for snow removal, and that was reduced. So we strengthened some wording there, but that is an outstanding issue in terms of snow clearing and removal. We did a little bit of work on data collection. We think that we want to make this a yearly report to council, so we need to clean up how we collect data and present that so it's consistent. Parking lots, sidewalks, and trails, something that aren't part of this policy, but they are other assets that we need to pay attention to. So we talked a bit about those, but there'll be something else that we'll have to share with council at a later date to talk about how those fit into the priorities. And then again, lessons learned and some of the things that we talked about and getting where we are today. With respect to the policy, specifically, we're proposing changes to some areas, the statement itself. As I mentioned, we've added some definitions for clarity. One of the things, again, that came out from the operations staff was a suggestion for a more consistent, transparent way to measure the accumulation. So admittedly, the way it's been practiced currently is that the operator on call or maybe the manager would get up at 5:30 in the morning, go look outside and check the depth of snow, and that's how we did it. Where they checked the depth was probably not consistent every time. So there's an idea about maybe being a bit more consistent in how we measure that. I'm not sure there's a policy. Again, we talk about responsibilities. We refined the priorities a little bit. Again, talking with the operations crew and looking at the existing policy, we found some revisions to the priorities we think that are beneficial. In relation to those priorities, we also defined some service levels that we think can be met, and then a little bit of wording and clarity around the responsibility for the highway. So with respect to the policy statement, we changed a sentence in the middle there. So in the current, it's the italicized sentence. Wording just a little different. It's really not critical, but it's just a different way to word that. And so we asked for it to look at the goal of policy, set priorities and service levels for the mitigation of hazards and travel concerns caused by snow and ice in the town of Edson. So that's really the only change there from the italicized portion of the current policy. A little less about just different way to word it, really. The definitions, the ones that are in sort of a tan color, I guess is what it would be. Those are the new ones that we've added to the policy. Again, define what a cleared road is. In this case, we suggested that it's the majority of the road surface are between 0 and 3 centimeters of snow accumulation or pack. So getting them black everywhere probably requires some different equipment, but we think that the majority of the roads being clear with a little bit of snow on is probably an acceptable definition of what a cleared road is. So we'll be looking for council's thoughts on that. Define snowfall accumulation. Again, it's just a clarity thing. Snowpack, we haven't really addressed snowpack in the policy, but it's a definition we put in because maybe at some point in the future, it might be a different way to look at how we measure and what triggers a policy. And then we also define what a windrow was, because there's some talk about windrows and whatnot. So the other thing that we are suggesting as well. So when council in February, when they asked for that, they passed a motion to change the threshold from 5 to 10. The policy reads it exceeds 5 centimeters, so we changed it to exceeds 10 centimeters. We thought maybe given it's a higher threshold, we should maybe change it from exceeds to reaches 10 centimeters. So that's what that is. That was a suggestion there. Added responsibilities in the policy, what council's responsibilities are in terms of the snow and ice clearing policy, and then what administration is. Obviously, council has the role to set budgets and service levels. I guess make amendments to the policy from time to time. Administration, our role is to create a safe operating procedure that outlines how we will implement the snow and ice control policy. We need to allocate and schedule operational resources when required. The CAO has the ability to reallocate or add services and support for the delivery of the service. We have an obligation to maintain effective communications with the public during the operations to make sure that they're aware of what's happening and how we're implementing the policy. It also addresses concerns we received. Administration also has a role to manage the allocated budget. And then one of the things we've added in there, and that's what this is essentially, the first one is we're going to do this sort of midsummer report to council to say, here's what we learned, here's how it went, and here's what we experienced with respect to the providing that level of service. So this is the snowfall accumulation measurement process that I mentioned. Where we landed on it was having 2 locations, set locations in town, one at the airport, one at Public Works. So one at the east end, one at the west end of town. And either one of those triggering the 10 centimeters would trigger the beginning of the operations. And those will be monitored by hopefully web cameras so that the operators, so some cases we had the operator on call may have lived out of town. So they had to get up at 5:30 in the morning, drive to town to see if the threshold was met. And if it wasn't, then they had to go back home. So it's kind of an odd thing for them. So we're trying to set it up so that they can dial in or log into that camera and physically inspect the threshold. The other thing that's really good about this is we're going to be able to collect data. So admittedly, we haven't collected storm event data very accurately or consistently historically. So this will also help us to do that. So, and I think it's a much more transparent, consistent way to record those snow events and then enact the policy. So really good suggestion. Hopefully it works well. Some of the other policy changes we're proposing. Again, I mentioned the strengthening a bit of the wording around enforcement. I'm not sure we're prepared to go full bore on that yet, but I think it's important to note that it is a struggle for our operations crew. There's a lot of issues with the amount of parked cars we have on the street during operations, and it does pose some problems for sure operationally. Clause 10 is direction to restart priorities once the threshold is met again. If your council recalls, when we did the work in February, we presented a lot of other municipalities and their policies, and this is a pretty consistent statement in those policies. Whenever the snow threshold was met again, they would stop where they're at and go back to the beginning. So we've added that. We also heard from council, I think it was in February, when we were here, that it was okay if the windrows were left in the middle of the road for a day or two. Council didn't seem to have any concerns with that, so we've added a clause in to address that with the understanding that at least every second intersection will be cleared for safe passage of traffic. And then, we also specifically excluded alleyways as a level of service within this policy. That was never part of the policy before, but it was never even addressed. And obviously council recalls that during last season's events, we did enact some contractors to do the alley because of the extreme snowfall we had. So the priorities themselves, current policy, priority 1 and 2 were essentially defined exactly the same. There's no difference in the definition of those priorities. What it was is in the SOP, they were defined as 2 different routes, because one was done through clearing snow by pushing snow to the ditch or the curb lane, and the other priority was clearing. So what we did is we just combined those into one. So it's all priority 1 now. The plowing equipment and the clearing equipment will be operating at the same time to get that priority done first. The new priority 2, which was the old commercial areas, pretty much the same. There was some tweaks again based on feedback from the operators and some internal external inputs. Just on efficiencies, there were some examples where they would do a block and then they would skip 2 blocks and go do another piece because it was residential houses. Well, from an operation perspective, why not just keep going? It's 2 blocks. Why pull up the blade and come back there next week? It just didn't make sense from an operational perspective. So we made some minor tweaks there. Priority 3 is probably the biggest change. The old priority 3 was the high traffic areas, and it included some major roadways as well as parking lots. So we removed the parking lots. Admittedly, this was a challenge for us last year. There was a point during the chaos of the snow that we had where we were getting pressure to get out and clear parking lots. The challenge was, and if you read the briefing note, we pull operators off to go to clear the parking lots. We don't have operators clearing snow on the streets. And we didn't think that was going to fly. So it was very much a conflict for us and how to transact that priority. So we've removed them, and we're going to have some further discussion on how we're going to deal with parking lots a bit later. But so they've been removed from that priority. But the other thing that we added is we added what we're calling collector routes through two of the neighborhoods, and 3 maybe. Tiffin, I think it is. That was called. Sorry, and then also whatever the other one was called. I'm going to show the maps here shortly, but what we did, the rationale behind that was because residential zones are the lowest priority. By doing sort of one swap through these residential neighborhoods during priority 3, we at least give some relief to that neighborhood so that you're only a block or 2 away from a cleared road instead of waiting for, in some cases they were waiting quite a long time.
20 days.
Yeah, to see a plow under there. So the idea behind that is just get a swath through the neighborhoods to provide some relief. So I think that's a pretty good add. Residential zones pretty much stayed the same except for zone G and F were combined. And again, that was based on feedback from the operations staff. They said really that we can do all this at once. We don't have to bust it off into 2. So we just combined those. So if we look at the map, got ahead of ourselves. So we also mentioned that we added service levels to these. So we're proposing, this wasn't part of the policy that we're proposing to add. Again, this is based on feedback from the crews. They believe priority 1 can be completed within 3 days. Priority 2 within 2, and then priority 3, 1. So a total of about 6 days to complete the priority areas. So this is the target that we're going to shoot for. And part of this year, you notice I've got a caveat at the bottom. This 10-centimeter threshold is pretty new. I mean, we used it right at the tail end of last season. So with a full season of that threshold, we're going to have to monitor and see how that works. But the staff are fairly confident that they can meet these service levels. So that'll be something we report on next year to see how we did in maintaining those. But I think that's a good add in terms of being able to measure and see how we're doing. So just to look at the maps again, priority 1 is the green lines represent the clearing zones, and the purple or magenta was the removal. It's all one priority now. 3 days to do this, 2 sets of equipment going to get it done.
Go ahead.
through the chair to Mr. Kimmons. So you're saying we're still gonna do the, put in the middle and pick it up?
Yeah, nothing's really changed, like the maps tweaked a bit, but really all we've done is combine them, because they can be done at the same time. So we have an operator and a unit doing the plowing, at the same time as we have an operator and a grader and the haul trucks picking up the snow. It's all part of the priority, be done in 3
And
days.
they get that, all that done in 3 days.
Yeah, we went over it a couple times with them, and they're fairly confident they can do that. 2 days is the commercial area, the old commercial area is priority 2. Basically, again, the middle core. I think this was the street here somewhere where we added the 2 blocks in, because they sort of did 1 block and stopped the use here. And they skipped 2 blocks, so we just kept them going down that one. But that's priority 2, not a lot has changed there. Priority 3 is where we added in these sort of collector routes that we're calling in through these 2 neighborhoods. That's part of priority 3. And then the residential zones, the only change is G and F have been combined into one, otherwise that stays exactly the same as it was. No adjustments there. So we talked a lot about equipment. We have 1 grader, as council is fully aware of. We have 2 snow blowing units. We did secure a better unit. Council's aware that last year we had a lot of trouble with our snow blowers breaking down. We did manage to secure a bit more reliable unit at the end of the season. And again, the crews are confident that's a pretty adequate unit, and we're gonna give that thing a good run this season. And hopefully we have a lot more success than we did last year. We do have a loader that's used for clearing. The other bucket loaders for moving. 4 tandem trucks, and the sanding truck is what we have in our fleet. We talked a lot about equipment. I know in the February presentation, there's a lot of talk about more blades on the ground. We did have discussions with the operators about adding plows or some plows to the tandem trucks or other units. And to be quite honest, they didn't feel that there was a lot of benefit to that. The biggest bang for our buck is going to be a second grader, really, to really keep this program running smooth. So Mr. Thompson, through his fleet management, we're hoping to be able to secure a grader for the second half of 2023, so the fall season of 2023. And that'll be a lease unit we're going to try for. Some current leases of the existing equipment are coming off the books mid-year next year, and we're hoping to use those funds just to roll over into a grader lease. So hopefully not a budget impact for that particular one. And then we're working on plans to maybe purchase a bigger loader and a bigger box blower for 2024 to replace these smaller units that we're using right now. But they're quite confident that with an extra grader, it's really where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck in terms of maintaining that level of service. So some other things I mentioned this that we still need to work on, parking lots, both the ones that for our facilities that we operate and use, and then there's a number of town-owned lots we've leased to third parties that, based on the agreements we have with them, we're obligated to do some of that maintenance. So we need to sort some of that out. Recreational trails, sidewalks, both on public lands and the private ones that we clear. So we talked to park staff about this already a little bit, and so ongoing work, and I'm sure council will be seeing some information on how we can manage this stuff for the supply system and how we fit it into the priorities with the roads. Some learnings about data. So as I mentioned, we want to do a bit better job of collecting more consistent data to report on for transparency. So again, hopefully these new mechanisms we're going to use to record accumulation, we can get daily accumulation totals and be able to record and report on that data. These service levels we define, the 3 days, the 2 days, and the 1 days, we're going to measure, and we're going to see how many times we meet those service levels, and we'll report back to council to say, yeah, they're working, or no, we need to take 4 days, or no, we can do this in 2 days. So that's an important way to measure our success. Obviously tracking our costs with contracted services and overtime and stuff like that. We're going to work hard to be a bit more consistent with reporting on that yearly. So it's fair to to look back and acknowledge what last year was. It was a pretty big year. I know I'm new to Edson, obviously, but even in talking with a lot of the operators, some of them commented that they don't remember a season like we had this past season. That first snowfall was quite a different snowfall. So we had heavy snow, we had extreme cold, freezing thaw cycles, which all begs the question, is this going to be the norm for us? We talked about the climate change stuff and the way the weather's changing for the planet, and maybe this is the new norm. It's just going to be something we're going to have to get used to dealing with every winter. We had lots of equipment breakdowns as reported. We were fairly successful in getting hauling contractors retained pretty quickly. But we did try to get a second grader, and that took a long time for us to, I think by the time they got there, we used them for a day or two, and that was about it. So very hard for us to get that second grader under contract. So we're going to work on trying to beef that up. Having said that, if we get a second grader in the fleet, that really will help us anyway. A reminder, the sand and salt mixture that we use is designed for traction and not melting of the snow. That's just the mix we use right now. Although we budgeted for contracted services at the snow dump in 2020 for the season, we didn't have budget for contracted services. There are a lot of overtime budgeted for this year, so we need to fix that. New leadership, admittedly, I think I was 2 weeks into this job and the snow started. So admittedly, there's things that I could have done differently or better. I've learned a lot over the last 2 or 3 months, and we'll be much more equipped and prepared next year to manage and adjust and deal with this stuff. So, and then COVID-19, conceivably, I don't have data, but conceivably there's some fatigue with citizens and residents and business owners about things, and they may have had a less tolerance for the level of service we were providing and the snow we were getting. And then we had staff shortages. We had a point in time where we were down half the crew. I think.
We had two operators show up one day, right? And the whole region had staffing shortages in January, February. That's pretty well known, but we weren't immune to it.
So there was a lot of things that happened that season, right? Our guys were working December, January. They barely had any time off, right? They worked their backsides off. So very admirable, and they worked very hard to deliver the service the best they could. So again, we talked a little about on-street parking. Really it does slow down the operations. There's increased risk for damage to both town equipment and private property. There's public safety risk when you're going around vehicles and parked cars. There's blind spots and stuff. In some cases, like I know there is, I think West Haven is really a tough one. It's a little bit narrower than some of the other streets, and it's curved, and there's a lot of parking, and that one's poses quite a bit of a challenge for the operators. Anyway, it's just something that we're going to have to keep our eye on. I don't know how where council sits on this, but I think some of the operators talked about having designated snow routes where there was no parking at all during the winter. And I'm not sure if we're ready to go there yet, but it's just something to be aware of, that it does pose challenges for sure. How we deal with the reporter problems and the issues. In January alone, we had 125 snow-related reporter problem entries. So we've got 8 staff and 8 pieces of equipment out working extensive hours, doing the best they can. And now we've got residents calling saying, I need mine done first. Very challenging, very challenging. And then also the ones that don't come through report a problem and how we prioritize those. So we have to think a little bit about how we're going to prioritize those. I think the best way is first come, first serve type of thing. But there may be some criteria around if it's somehow deemed to be a high public safety concern, then maybe we have to stop and figure out how to do it. So we're going to put some more thought to this, which comes down to the next point about staffing. We've already started some discussions with the Parks Department and Bob's staff about potentially some cross-training of operators throughout the organization to provide some extra bench strength during events and when needed. So we're going to look at that. And then as the briefing note talked about, maybe exploring setting up some casual operator pool. I know other municipalities do that, where they have contract operators that are retired maybe, and they can just be called in for treatment events or to help with some of this stuff. So we are continuing to look at options there. So the financial stuff, so the big numbers. So this is a big number. the season, and this is just the January season, so basically January and February. It's over $192,000 of extra money that we had to spend to hire contractors, pay overtime, and materials to get the roads cleared. It's a big number. And as the briefing note talks about, I think the lanes themselves was a $50,000 exercise to get the lanes done. So it's a lot, but we have a snow reserve, as council's aware. So we'll be bringing back an RFD here to, I think might be the next council meeting to ask council to consider transferring the snow reserve to get back to hold for this year, so we can continue with our programs for the summer and the fall season. As I mentioned earlier, the second grader, we're hoping to be able to cover under existing operating budgets with that lease. Get rid of one lease and add another back to back. So hopefully that works out for us. Although we budgeted, as I mentioned, contract services for snow dump, we're going to probably think about putting in some budget money for hauling for 2023, and again for some staff overtime. And when it comes to the reserve, the reserves are great to have, but we have to replenish them. So if we're going to draw down, we're going to have to figure out a way to replenish it. So we haven't totally figured that out yet, but one of the thoughts is that if we experience some surplus in the department for a year, that surplus can be put back into the reserve to help get that back up to par, so we have it when we need it. So to summarize, there were some challenges. It was an extreme year. Lots of factors contributed to some of the heartaches we had, but based on the discussions we've had with our staff, everyone feels that it's a pretty good policy, and the way we're doing snow clearing and removal in the town is probably the best way to do it. Obviously the second grader is a big piece of that, and ultimately maybe a bigger blower, but really with some tweaks, I think we're in pretty good shape to provide the level of service that the community is expecting. And the other thing I just wanted to leave us with is one of the things we should be mindful of is to resist the temptation to rewrite the whole policy and operating procedures every year, because it doesn't give us the ability to learn, right? Test it for a couple of years and for a couple of different seasons and see how it works before we make wholesale changes. Tweaking is always good. Certainly we should always do that, but resist the urge for major change on a yearly basis for sure. So that concludes all my jabbering, and we're happy to help answer any questions.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. It was very well. Any questions from Mayor Zahara?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for all the work that's gone into this and interacting with our operators as well. No doubt this season was challenging. And I think one of the biggest challenges is we were restarting at 5 centimeters, and we never could seem to get ahead of the situation. We fell further and further behind. So I think that's going to make a huge difference. And I think the blower situation as well, being down so much last season. When it comes to parking lots, has administration considered contracting that out to alleviate some town resources? And my thought on that is, when I speak to operators in industry, they're not very keen on doing grading in town around vehicles. That's not something that they normally do because they're on lease sites or what have you. But we have a number of contractors that, parking lots is what they do.
Yeah.
And that would focus our resources, especially if we have a second grader, to focus on the streets and more people are commuting. Have you guys given any thought to that?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. So we did have a lot of discussions. I mean, I asked quite frankly to the operators on a number of occasions, should we contract this type of service out? And I don't recall it being, something that they said, yeah, absolutely. But I think that's a really good one to talk further about. I think we talked about contracting out the downtown core maybe or something like that to do at 2 in the morning with the contractor, but they felt that wasn't necessary. But certainly, that's something that when we talk with the Parks Department and start to prioritize those things, we can talk about.
And just to further elaborate on Mr. Kitlett's conversation there, we actually did hire some contractors to do a couple of our parking lots this season as we were trying to keep up. So I think we paid 2 or 3 different contractors on a couple of occasions to come out and get us caught up on those.
Wonderful.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just think that would be a good option, even if, you know, maybe it's not standing, but in those extreme circumstances, if you have them pre-qualified. And it supports their local businesses as well. And the other piece on the enforcement on parking, I'm 100% behind towing and moving vehicles, especially, you know, West Haven Drive, a windrow got left in the middle because they were done for the day. And somebody decides to park on, like, there's signage up, there's a windrow in the middle, and they block the entire street on a Sunday afternoon. So I am in favor of doing that. I know there's costs associated with that, and I know the public gets frustrated, but in some of these areas, I'm amazed that our operators are not scraping up vehicles and damaging things, because it's quite a mess, especially like you mentioned in West Haven and some areas of Tiffin as well.
Councillor Taylor?
Yeah, through the chair to Mr. Kitlitz and Mr. Fisher as well. I sort of echo what Mayor Zahara said about contracting out to third parties in terms of doing parking lots. So 2 questions. The first one is on parking lots. How many town-owned parking lots do we have?
Yeah. Sure, I'm not sure, you know.
There was silence there, so I didn't know if I was on mute or what. So I didn't know what's going on.
Don't have that data readily available. We should have had that for you. I apologize, but ballpark that, it's probably quite a few.
There's at least 10
Yeah,
that we have to clear.
yeah, let's say in there.
You said 10, sorry?
At least, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
To the chair, just my second question. We spoke about in February about the options between removing snow and just pushing it off to the side. And then I'm sure both of you and the rest of the administration had lots of conversations around the benefits and advantages, disadvantages to both. Just wondering why, at the end of the day, in terms of when I have questions on it from the public, why we settled on removing the snow instead of pushing it off to the side.
Through the chair to Councillor Taylor. So there's a lot of considerations in where we do that, and I can't bring up the slide right now, but if you look at the priority map, where we have the ability to easily push it off to the side without impacting any parking, we've opted to move to a clearing operation instead of removal. And then for the remainder of the priority roads and the residential areas, we're looking at removal mostly based on maintaining those parking spaces and the ability to move through those neighborhoods well once it's removed. Because when we've got the windrow there, like even Hillendale, where we've got fairly wide streets, when you add the parking on either side of the street, and then you've got a windrow in the middle, or you push it off to the one side, and then you're struggling to get all of those vehicles out there. It's tight. It's really tight to move around there. And if you got somebody who's really bad at parking, it gets really bad. So
I think when Pat, you correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the other considerations comes into play is the advantages of getting the snow off the streets for spring melt, because we have some stormwater drainage issues in town, and the less snow we have piled up on the sides is helpful for our spring thaw too as well. So that comes into play a little bit as well.
yeah, well, while we were doing snow removal in February, we also had a crew working on clearing culverts and ditches so that drainage could go, because it had gotten so warm. We had flooding concerns at the same time. So.
Councillor Persishny?
Through the chair to their administration. You know, years past, and the past isn't always correct, but you know, they would push to the side, but they'd still pull it. And when they pulled it, they pulled all the dirt and the grime, and the roads were a lot cleaner in the spring. Because right now we pull all the dirt, all the snow, and then we sand the roads after that. And if it doesn't get any more snow, all that certain down is dirt and sand and gravel still there in the spring. I understand the culvert, but a lot of times pushing the snow really quick, you can get, instead of 3 days to do all those priority routes, they have it done in a day. And then you're on to picking up later when that storm cycle, because in Edson, our cycles have always been, it doesn't snow for one day. It snows for 3 or 4, and then we get sun, and then, so I don't know. I like the policy, don't get me wrong. If they feel that, and I really appreciate the fact you talk to your staff, the ones, the boots on the ground, to get that feedback. I like what you guys have done with it. This is a deliverable as a council and as a community that people can touch and feel. So getting this right is important. And this is the one that everybody sees, and especially Edson. So.
Counselor Schneider.
Through the chair, I also like the changes you guys had made. With the second grader, that seems to be the biggest issue. And then as far as the contract grader, I would have personally said, okay, who's next up? But I like the idea of that. So your idea is to lease one and keep the other one, correct? So we have 2.
Yeah.
Okay. The other issue that we didn't, because you touched on it, back alleys, and it was a concern last year. Some of the businesses in town count on the back alley for their delivery of product, and that became an issue. Like they said, okay, the back alley, we didn't clean, they cleaned their parking lot. So if we address it, because some of them said our contractors will clean that section in the back alley, but they're not allowed to. So it would be a possibility of addressing some of the back alleys to give the owners, if the town can do it, the contractor permission to clean that part of the alley. Because that was a policy, and sometimes we turn a blind eye to it. Another time the guy said, hey, I ain't touching that, I'm in trouble. So, that's something we have to address in certain areas. Because I agree, cleaning all back alleys has been a battle for many years. You can never solve it, but we could address those ones. But other than that, I like what you read, what we're reading. I like what you tweaked. The bigger snow blower, the greater. That's some of the address issues, but that's the only one I wanted to point out. That was an issue last year with back alleys in commercial areas.
Counselor Byer.
Thanks, through the chair to council and administration. Thank you for the report. I certainly appreciate some of the changes that were made, and I remember when this was brought to us quite a few years ago. Councillor Taylor kind of asked one of the questions that I had asked then, and the response regarding snow, pushing it to the side, snow clearing, pushing it to the side of the road was something that, was kind of in favor of, and that same response regarding the storm drainage was given along with too much water infiltrating into the road in the spring or something like that. I don't remember exactly, but it was something like that. And I'm still interested in that, but I understand that we have some challenges there. And I'm interested in that, especially after talking to some community members that come from like Ontario and Quebec that live in communities that have equal or more snowfall than we have in Edson. And I said, well, what was snow clearing like then? And they said, oh, they just snow blowed everything into our yards and it was cleared in 3 days and we could drive. And they were happy. And I was just like, ooh, oh, wow, okay. And so I was surprised by that. And then I had the opportunity to go to Quebec this spring, and I got to observe what that actually looked like. And every single resident had this tarp-like thing halfway up their lawn that was covered in still snow, because there's just, piles of snow in all the yards, and, some kind of grub from the roads and dirt and salt and sand. And, but they could get around, and they all drove cars. So I'm still a little bit nervous. There's people, 21 days is still a long time for a big snow removal for people that have a car, and they have to drive up a hill to get out of their residential area, right? I live on a hill, so I get to drive right down. So I'm lucky that by the time I have to drive back up, there's been enough packed down that I can make that in a non-4-wheel drive vehicle. So I'm comfortable moving forward with something like this, but I would like to strive towards pushing it off to the edges where, especially if there's not a sidewalk or something, that would be a more standard level of service. I know that that's reduced, but getting access to all the roads, I feel Edson is looking at that. Okay, let's remove all the snow, and that's our standard, or that's the level of service that we're looking for. But it also takes the longest to get all the roads cleared, right? Which makes sense. To looking towards how do we get the roads cleared faster without necessarily removing all that snow, because it does come at a greater cost, as we see. I just don't know, is that something that administration you guys kind of talked about. I'm just kind of looking, I know that's a little bit different than what you proposed here, but I'm just curious about what kind of discussion was had with that. And I realize the storm drainage system could impact that heavily.
So through you, Mr. Chair. So I guess I'll honestly have a couple things I can share. Certainly, there's all kinds of different ways to do snow removal. I've worked in municipalities that don't even have a snow blower. It's all windrow, right? And if it gets too big, then they'll contract out guys to come remove the skid steers and stuff. But so I've seen all kinds of ways. I've even seen the snow blow on the lawn way. So I've seen it all. I think one of the things we did talk about with our operators is where we can, where there is places where we can just push it to the side where it makes sense, and they'll do that. So one of the things we're building into the safe operating procedure, I'm going to get some legal opinion on this with some of the issues with policy decisions in the operational level, but where they can, they will do that. The other thing I guess I'll submit is maybe what we'll consider, and Pat, you can weigh in on this if you think I'm off base, but in securing another grader, one of the things is when you push to the side, the curb lane, you need to have a gate on your grader, because otherwise you're blocking in every driveway and every crossroad and alleyway. Our current grader and the gate that we kind of have for it is not working out for us. So it's just not, it's been a nightmare to maintain. It's not working. So maybe in the procurement of the second grader, we get a bigger grader that has the gate system, and then we can experiment a little more with that and try it. But certainly that's a fair, there's probably a good mix out there, that a balance where we can do both. But
Well,
Thanks. Yes, and a follow up to that. Yeah, thanks. And I appreciate that, Mr. Kitlitz. And there are some roads that, pushing to the side doesn't work, right? Like, there's cul-de-sacs that, it's not going to happen, right? Like, I think that in some areas, like, there's not an option to do it another way. But I can see having a proper grader that has the right, components on it to make that feasible is helpful. I just can't remember what the slide said. So are any of these pieces of equipment that you've been mentioning, will we have them this year or is that next year? I don't get my
share. If all goes well, the grader for the fall season of 2023.
So next year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fall. Loader would be the fall 2024 sometimes. So after the new blower.
call to position.
Used to have a grader at the gate.
Yes, I did.
And they didn't like it. And then they got rid of the gate and they just followed the grader with a piece of machinery and cleared driveways and cleared the openings of the vehicles that were on the street. And I know in Newfoundland, when you talk to councillors out there, in some places they don't even care. They just plow them and let them shovel it out. So so there's lots of other options out there.
If you do that, I'm out. I'm done.
Yeah, no, that's okay. You get all the calls, so it's okay with us. I think at the end of the day, it's the quickest and fastest way is the thing, and our community got used to a quite a speedy clearing, and what we experienced last winter, and this was not. They were following policy, so there's no policy that was put in that was not well thought out. This is a lot better thought out than the previous policy. It's just that last winter snowfall is. In my entire life, we'll be in a lot of winters like that. That's not an anomaly. The melt freeze was more of an anomaly, which I think we're seeing more with climate change. But it's we get snow in Edson, and we get melts every year. We get a spring, we get a winter melt. It's a whole life. Our snowpack gets really deep, and then it drops, and then it goes back up, and then it drops. So it's the simplest and quickest way is always. And the most efficient, and we've been picking up for years. Even had years when we didn't have a blower broke down. They used to be a big front end loader. I think it was on loan somebody at one point. They were just about as fast with the front end loader as they were with the blower. So it's my 2 bits. But thank you for your presentation.
I can go after you if you want to speak on.
Go ahead, Councillor Schneider.
These leases, and it's been several years. We have leases, and I know leases are opportunities. Have we approached lease companies? Because I'm looking at, we got the smaller loaders, and like Councillor Persicny said, when the snow blower goes down, we have a loader right now, like the loader at the yard is equal to the one at the airport, which will handle a bigger snow blower. So if we approach the lease company and said, you know what, we're done with these, but we will lease bigger so that we're not cutting them out. Would there be an opportunity? So if we can't get a second grader until fall of 2023, secure a grader, because that was part of our problem last year, where we're saying the thaw freeze. And that was not, and the only way to solve that is grade faster. So when it did warm up, the graders could have pushed it, because I've seen the challenges. They graded it, they had the perfect plan, it warmed up, and made ice, and ice is hard to move. So I like your plan about the graders, but if we can fast track, meaning you secure a contract grader and put it in there, because there's lots of graders around, you want the gate, and you're priority one. So we get hit with a snowfall, priority one, you send the contract grader out. That way, we're not worried about overtime. We're not worried about watching the clock years going. Snow removal, it was your job. That at midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, you're out. So you get a contractor doing that. That solves our thaw. And I would approach the lease guys and say, hey guys, you either make me a deal, we want bigger equipment, or in a year or 2 years, then we're going with another company. So that may put the onus on them, because there is equipment out there. It's just a matter of securing it now before it snows.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there. So the first one, have we approached anybody about any leasing companies? So with respect to the grader, yes, we have quotes currently. That's how we know it fits within our budget.
Yeah.
There are delivery issues with the actual delivery of the new equipment. So that's where the probably isn't going to be ready for this year, but could be ready for next winter or next season is coming from. It's more got to do with the delivery. It's about 9 months, I think, is what I saw on the quotes. For the snow blower, we've secured a larger, more robust blower than we were using going into next season already. And we still have one of the existing units as a spare. So we've got a little bit of leeway there. For the bigger RPM style blower, we do have quotes for that as well, and deliveries. We figured the crater was a bigger impact to our equipment. So we would wait till 2024 when another piece of equipment came off, and we could pick up another lease then. What's the thinking there? With respect to contract graders, we did try that. A lot of the contractors were really leery about working on the roads, and so that was some of the reluctance, particularly snagging a manhole. Because if you've driven around town, seen them pop, and if you hit that wrong with the grader, you're breaking your table. So it's not a cheap fix. I think we did that in 2019, and it was 20 or 30 grand.
So the one that I forgot was the bigger loaders, and the reason I stress that, because I've seen the loaders. If you get bigger loaders, if the grader goes down, they have the capability of plowing. Like you have one big loader that can do it, the other two are too small.
That's right.
So if you can get bigger loaders, if the grader goes down, the loader can take the place of the grader temporarily.
Okay, moving on. Councilor Zaire. Pardon me. I kind of want to sleep after Jade give us a speech here.
I'm glad we can have fun. Talking about these things.
Well, yeah, I'm not off that, but.
I think some of this comes down to is expectations, and I think sometimes the expectations and what we can actually deliver to wildly different things. And you know, I talked to many residents that knew that we were doing the best that we could last year. And I think getting a better understanding, blowing all the snow into people's yards, I think we'd all be
Looking for a job.
yeah, looking for a job and up a tree someplace probably, because that's not what people expect nowadays. So finding that correct balance, I do have to agree with what Councilor Schnard said. That doesn't happen very often. I just want to put that out there.
That's why he calls you counselor.
That-
10 years.
When it comes to alleyways, and this is a struggle when I talk to people, is definitely in the commercial zones, especially in the spring when the melt's starting to happen. You know, we need to be able to respond to that. And that if a business needs that access and they're willing to go and get their contractor to do it, I don't see why we should hold that up. I understand the liability piece, but if they're pre-qualified or if there's some sort of mechanism in place to do that, just like, you know, people that have blades on their quads and they're trying to get alleys cleared to get people unstuck, and then they're getting abused because they're, you know, technically breaking the law. we need to have some flexibility there, or provide that level of service. So I certainly would like to see, when it comes to alleyways, some flexibility there. I don't think we need to do alleyways every winter, but there are specific areas in which some homes, that's where their driveways are, and that's the only way they can get in and out. Then, you know, we have many disabled people and seniors, so we need to be conscious of that as well. When we talked about this policy a number of years ago, the key thing to me is that flexibility piece. And I think that was missed. I had concerns when we did pass it. I think giving the CAO a little bit more authority in that regard. I know the CAO may not necessarily like to be put in that position, because there's a lot of pressure that comes with that. I think we need to understand that, giving our staff that flexibility, pushing to the sides. I love that we clear the snow. I certainly understand that, like on 6th Avenue and 48th Street and 49th Street, we can push to the sides and come get that in a week or 2 weeks. I do hesitate to just do that and then leave it there, because I used to live on 48th Street. I used to live on 6th Avenue. And if wind rose this high, even as a young guy, I had problems getting, you know, to the vehicle parked on the street. So how does that impact our seniors? We want people to walk and be active. So I do like what you've done here. I think adding those routes through West Haven and Tiffin are huge. During the peak of that snow season last year, I went into Tiffin, and a certain councillor was complaining about his tree. And it's quite a long ways to get from the back end of Tiffin to a cleared street. So having that one access can make a world of difference, especially for emergency crews, which is always something we're focused on. And same thing, it's not as bad in West Haven, but that route you have, that's the route everybody takes. So if you can get to that route, perfect. So thank you for that. And I look forward to seeing what you bring forward. I'd be interested in 2024 is a long time. That's two, 3 snow cycles away. If there's things that we can do to move that up, I'd be certainly in favor of that as well. Obviously, supply chain issues right now are a big cause of concern.
Councillor Taylor.
Thanks to the chair, to admin. Thank you for this very comprehensive policy. I think I do like this policy. I like the changes that you've made to it. I think, I echo what Councillor Petition said in terms of you spoke to the people that do this job, right? And spoke about what they can realistically do and offer our community. And I think you've benchmarked that well throughout the policy. Bringing up just a couple of things that have been spoken about around the table, the pushing versus removing of the snow. I know you have had lots of discussions on it. The thing that keeps ringing in my ear is when Mr. Fisher, and this isn't the first time he said it, when he's talking about the impacts on infrastructure. And that always alarms me when we talk about pushing snow and holding it there. So yeah, it might be quicker to do it that way, but perhaps the financial cost later to us might be far more awful in that way. So I would perhaps look at, wanting to keep the current removal of the snow, I think is a better plan. I like what Councillor Chenard said in terms of about the alleyways. Looking through your report, it costs about $50,000 to clear all the alleyways. Is that correct?
I think that was just residential, right, Pat?
No, we had 2 contractors, sorry, through the chair. We had 2 contractors for clearing out alleyways engaged. So we had 1 contractor working in the commercial areas and 1 contractor working in the residential areas. So that was clearing it one time.
Okay, all right. And right now it was the policy, the CAO would then have the power to, if in extraordinary circumstances, to send people out to do that. Would that be done? Could that be done on a case by case basis, or would it be like all alleyways, or is there any flexibility to that to address the issues? As Mayor Zahara said, that's where people park. That's the only place where people park. And if there's one alleyway that's just turned into awfulness, can we just get that one done? If there's one commercial area that needs to get done, do we have that flexibility just to address 1, 2, and not do a whole thing of it?
So if I could through the chair, so I think that's some great input. I think what I would answer that is what maybe we'll do is we'll go back and we'll do a bit more of an analysis on identify which properties only have lane access. And maybe that's what we do. We identify some of these that are need to be on the list. So yeah, let us, I mean, we've heard that alleyways need some attention, so let us take that one back and do a little bit of thought on that for sure.
I appreciate that. And to check one more comment, is that okay?
Go ahead.
Any consultation with the businesses on Main Street? Always Main Street it becomes a hot topic, like always. And I know it's not a priority one route, right? And how many days we have to give in terms of, and make sure that it's empty and things like that. Just wondering about consultation with businesses on Main Street about what they would like to see in terms of, clearing, for businesses, for people that are going to park there and things like that, what their expectations might be. Just curious, any consultation there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did not engage any of the downtown business owners on Main Street, sorry. We did talk about that with the operations crew. I mean, as I mentioned earlier, we talked about maybe getting contractors to do that at 2 a.m. when it's just dark and everyone's at home. I think our operators, the feedback they gave us is what we can do is just do some shift. They can start earlier in the morning to get the downtown done before things open. But I think there's merit in maybe having a conversation with them, because in truth, during our land use bylaw engagement, believe it or not, we got some feedback on snow and ice on the sidewalks on Main Street, believe it or not. So good thought.
Thank you.
CEO Beveridge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the things I wanted to just kind of bring this all together is that you'll note there's been a lot of consideration on this item. This has not been something that we brought this back in February, for council's discussion on a piece that we knew that we weren't going to be successful in removing the snow and needed some assistance in removing some barriers with the policy as it stood. And so through the last several months, it's been many conversations with all areas of administration. So not just the equipment operators, which is critical. In our view, that was a step that really needed to be taken, but also just in discussing with every, other communities as well as other aspects of the organization as well. So I think what you've seen, and I hear from council's comments, and is that the accountability is what we've also added in within this policy, as well as just the idea with the data, bringing back consistent data from year after year following this. This was a very big challenge for us. Comparing the data from past years, it's challenging when you don't have a consistent approach each and every time. So you're not comparing apples to apples, if you will. So with that, of course, setting the service levels. This is something that we spoke about at the strategic planning sessions. This is something that's really important to us as far as setting these standards for the community, in order to, we can always stand up and say, this is what the service levels, and if they are not meeting what council wishes to set, then we can adjust. But looking at that, working through and having patience with the policy, that's always something that this is a very thorough look, working through these equipment, the supply chain, of course. I believe that everyone is working and wants to see this to be successful in our community. We don't enjoy their phone calls either. I know council doesn't enjoy, and we want to strive for a more successful season and in the future. So I really appreciate comments that council provided tonight, because that's really helpful for us as we go back and we review again. This is a work in progress, and I think there's been some really valuable comments tonight that will help better prepare us. It gives that different perspective. So anyway, that's just what I want to end on. It's just that this, knowing that this has been a very thoughtful approach to how we conduct this very critical service within our community. So thank you.
Councilor Precision.
Through the chair to CEO Beveridge. Thank you for bringing it to us in this time again. It's much better to be dealing with this now and have it ready for fall and not behind the 8 ball. So it's good work.
For sure. I guess, question been answered and asked here, what I've had on my paper here and that. The one thing that was brought up to me a lot throughout the winter was our signs going up. They went up and they stayed up for 14 days and nobody showed up into the residential units at all. And the people didn't know if they should move their vehicle, if it's gonna get towed, get ticketed. And they got upset. And then when it did come, they were all back in there and they had nothing but a problem on that day. So is there a chance that if they go up and we have to move to another priority, we can take them back down again or something, pick them up? Because there's places there, like I say, 14 days. I looked at them, they were sitting there for 14 days. And people just got really upset by that stuff.
For sure, Mr. Chair. That's something we've had discussions with at the operational level, and then CO Beverages has given us the word that that's a pretty important part of this. So, and the safe operating procedures where we dealt with that, we just put in a policy that it's important for us to communicate. So we're working on some tweaks to the safe operating procedure to shore that up a bit better than it is, for sure.
And I guess the other one that I got a lot of flack on was our crews are in the school zones when school is in. And the kids are trying to get across the windrows, and not only that, but the 2 daycares down here are doing the same thing and trying to climb over. And we do it after school is in or way before or something.
That is also in the safe operating procedure, very clearly documented now. Those are no-fly zones during certain times. So yeah.
Okay. And I like Councillor Taylor said about Main Street when we also had light up there, and we want our downtown core people to survive, the business to be there. And they were very upset because people could not get in, they couldn't get stuck. So I agree, we have to address that too.
Yeah, and if I could respond to that, because I think that's a really good point. One of the things that, and we had a lot of discussions with the operators about this, is the level of flexibility we can have for them to make operational decisions in the field. So for example, you know, in the council decision, you made the comment that they were following the policy. So there's a lot of pressure to follow the policy. There's nothing that said, in this situation, go ahead and break policy and go do this. So I think we're talking about that. Like I said, we're getting some legal opinion with some of the recent court cases that have happened in terms of operations and policy decisions. So we want to have that flexibility, but believe it or not, there's some fear on that, right? There's some fear on the flexibility because we make a call in the field and maybe some folks in the community or council don't agree with that call. So it's a very tough thing to do, but we are talking about it and we are investigating ways to build in that flexibility in the SOP within legal parameters to give us that. So we've talked about it for sure.
And I know I'm glad to hear. I think you know that we have a team here now that is very open to suggestions. And I believe our workers feel more comfortable now that they can approach administration with ideas or suggestions, and they feel that they're being heard now. They're not being just saying, you know, just go and do your job, go away, and that. If they got a suggestion, I believe they feel they can do so. I do like this policy. I like to think everybody else does here and that. I think it's a work in progress. It's always going to be a work in progress. So I think we learn year after year what we can do better in that. So is there any other questions? No, you can't speak.
I'll use sign language.
Just
Mayor's, yeah, Mayor's here.
just quickly, I know you mentioned seasonal snow bans. I certainly would not be in favor of a year-round snow ban, but I think that's something that we should investigate for snowfalls, especially in those streets that we have a lot of issues that are narrow and where people consistently don't remove the vehicles. It's funny. So like in the peak of everything going on, you drive through West Grove, all the vehicles are gone. Like, yes, please do our street. And then you go a block over and that entire street is filled with vehicles and the signs are up. I think it goes back to a little bit to Councillor Devon's point is we need to get better at indicating and being there and communicating that. And sometimes you say when it says, you know, snow removal the next 4 days, well, sometimes we work on the weekend, sometimes we don't. So we don't know what's going on. I know we're finding that. I know you guys have had a lot of conversations and what that signage looks like as well. But I think that's something that we certainly should, you know, maybe consider a little bit more in some of those areas where we know we have a problem.
Okay, beat it to death here. So
I'm gonna agree with the mayor. How's that? I like
yeah, we don't get a raise. So. Thank you, gentlemen. There's no more questions. Thank you very much. Looking forward to it. Okay, moving on here. No corporate services, community protective service information. Sundry item, G1, FCM conference reporting. To the two counselors that went down. Who would like to go first?
Or do you want to go first?
Doesn't matter.
I'm gonna steal all your ideas. Okay, I'll go first. As they were doing one of the speeches, we were pleased. Edson was mentioned for incentive to talk about our homeless pod, so that was nice, positive. The other one is I was talking with Don Iverson, former mayor of Edmonton, asked him what he was doing. He's working on a very interesting project. He's working with insurance companies, and they want to plan for when we talked about fires, floods, and etc. So they're gonna. He's working with the city of Edmonton, but he's going to span it out through all of us so he can approach Edson. So an example, if we have a flooding issue, we have a fire, that it'll help our premiums trying to get the cost down, because even we're watching the news tonight, Calgary 2013 floods, the millions of dollars. So they want to work on if we can improve something. So work with the town, like we talked about infrastructure and snow removal. The other one, I didn't catch the numbers, but with the fuel tax that we get from the federal government, it was on a sliding scale before, and they want to put it on a set number. And unfortunately, Councillor Moore has the notes on that. And through networking, which actually I had Consultation with me, so he helped me network. What came up and a lot of times in the speeches was the housing, the federal housing plan, where it doesn't work. So use the example, what works downtown Vancouver may not work in Edson, Alberta. So they attacked the federal government on that issue to change it, how it's not working. The other thing was where we are talking about Edson, our unemployment, talking to people coast to coast. We all have the same problem. Employment, like it's hard, staffing. When I say, oh, geez, town of Edson looking for employees, well, back in Nova Scotia, little town said, we got the same problem. So, and even people from bigger centers. The other thing that was interesting is out at the landfill, where we talked about the gases being released from landfills, where the staff should live long enough to do this, but they put in gas turbine. And just capturing the gases, calculating what it is, they can earn $2 million a year generating power. The initial motor was a 20-cylinder, $5,000 engine, and a cooling problem, but it generates power. The other one was I went on the RCMP tour, which was interesting. We did not get to go to barracks, but we went in there and they were talking about staffing and recruiting of officers, and one problem they're having, and I guess I can announce because he told us, is the RCMPs coming out of training are being poached. So they are to report to whatever station, and some other police force is poaching. Not a huge problem, but the concern was you've trained these individuals and they're gone. And then one was a personal goal, but I went there, I got to see Nero. And the reason who Nero was he was a famous horse that was used in the RCMP musical rides, and there is a plaque on it. He was a very rank horse, so my father-in-law rode him. So when the horse passed away, every person that got bucked off line put money together to have this horse stuffed. So the museum was interesting. Oh, and just a note, if you go to Regina, they sell souvenir rocks by lots, because you need them because it's very windy, beautiful city, but windy. And I know the other two counselors have similar stuff, so I'll let them report.
Stuffed horses, stuffed squirrels.
There was no squirrels, but they have a famous horse, and I do have pictures of it.
That's superstition.
Thank you. It's been a while since I've been to FCM, and surprisingly enough, you attend and there's a lot of faces that are still the same. But the talk has changed, and maybe the biggest takeaway I saw from FCM is the conversations, our study sessions, our resolutions. A lot of it is really climate driven, and that's changed considerable since the last time I attended an FCM. Even in the trade show was the first one in multiple years. A lot of surprise from the booths, because where's all the administrators? I said, well, there's no camera this year, and they said, because but it was interesting, but nonetheless, like, there's different technologies. We talked about electric vehicles, there's electric trucks, electric buses, and the dynamics of that has changed. We had a special opportunity while we were there. So in meeting with the County was there as well. And our fellow, I missed the meeting today because I was at work, but the other committee members from our Maltese facility, we had a unique opportunity. They caught wind of a special project that they did, which was actually attached to the conference center. And through the mayor's office of Regina, we were able to line up a meeting with the city of Regina's. It's called Real. Yeah, it's an acronym. And so we had the opportunity to go on a tour. So with the mayor of the county and Councillor Mitchell, Councillor Chenard and myself, we attended this backdoor tour. So it was like an impromptu study tour that they did. They took us to their facility, and to describe their facility, they did some really, really neat things with it. It is huge. So it's not something that would be in the scale of Edson. To give you perspective, it's got 6 indoor arenas, full-size indoor field house, no aquatic center on it, but it's also attached to an older conference center and the new conference center, which they had huge agricultural fairs. Some really neat things they did with it is they focused on the quantity of stuff they can deliver as opposed to the look of it. So it's very, very square building. It's not hideous, but it's like you go inside the field house, it's pre-eng building, done, 4 walls. Slap it up, throw some turf in there, and their floors, we don't use tile, they use like very much to banister for. They took a concrete, did a slight cut on it. Super easy to clean, timeless, easy to maintain, very inexpensive. You have to put concrete down anyway. They said, well, parents scream at the kids too much. They took out the spectator stands and they rented out the space from the spectators. They all have to watch it from the end. But to solve their problem, they serve beer. So everybody's happy because they can get beer, they can watch the windows, but they kept the parents. But they have only one of 6 arenas has actual stadium seating. But they did things different. Like all of our arenas have ends that come off, and you drive in through the end of your arena. But these are side-by-side arenas. They put overhead doors in between them. So they hosted fairs or shows. They had beautiful access in between the arenas. Super simple design, super simple thought. They said the biggest priority they focused on was a huge, beautiful end, like entrance, like a big drop-off area. That was paramount for them. And if you go see their facility, it's very simple. They got a lot of bang for their buck. So it was a very interesting tour. And then we got the opportunity then to meet with the Real group. And so we met in there, they went to their boardroom and talked to them about their challenges and so forth. And then they disclosed to us, because they said, well, we have to be very clear. We are part of your bidding package. We're like, what? What do you mean you're part of our bidding package? They go, well, we're operational consultants and we put a bid in with one of the bidders. Right. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? So they shared all kinds of things and stuff in bidding package. And we got talking about other projects and other things. They said, and sometimes in bid packages, you really narrow things down that don't give bidders opportunity for creativity. And they said, so sometimes you're so narrowed down and focused that you are, we want 255,000 square feet. And now they're trying to find that envelope. And then they're like, I said, well, in Fort McMurray, they built a beautiful stadium, the seats are in there. He goes, well, he says, we were on that bid package. He goes, they wanted 18-inch seats. The standard in Canada is 20. He says that, they're 22 inches, I think it was. That's a way bigger seat. He says, yeah, you lose 100 seats, but people are comfortable. So these are the things that they said, if you're too specific, your prices go through the roof. And they said that in their facility, they were just focused on, we need to get this much stuff. We don't need deluxe and fancy. We need deliverables to our community, and they monitor these, they run these arenas year round. So we had an opportunity to go with the county for dinner after. We had an amazing conversation about the fact of the project, and it was well worth its weight in gold to have that conversation. Now it's a big organization because they have a huge egg facility. They run their arena, and they also run Mosaic, which we had a tour. And you think of Mosaic, which is a beautiful new football stadium in this country. We go on a study tour of Mosaic, and it's all, wow, grandiose, everything's perfect, we've made no mistakes. Then you get in the back door meeting, well, there were some mistakes. Really? They said there was no mistakes. They said, like any new build, you're gonna miss out on these things. And he says, they go, oh, they finally can go all the way on the fans love it. And then the people who work the back goes, yeah, but you can't go underground all the way around. That's a huge problem. And then they thought we could feed everybody from one side of the building, with 33,000 fans to walk through with food carts. He said, that doesn't work either. So you're like, okay, so even though you get these things with these amazing people, you can have these mistakes. But so it was a very interesting conversation to have with the Real group. So And then, of course, the Saskatchewan hospitality is second to none. They're a lot like Alberta, so it was great. The conference itself was heavily attended as usual with Albertans. And Councillor Chenard touched on it. The gas tax is no longer being called the gas tax; it's now the Community Initiatives Development, and the big resolution was to stabilize it instead of the fluctuating scale. Which the resolutions are a lot more of the show us the money resolutions. So there wasn't not a lot of high contested resolutions at the conference. Something else I wanted to talk about with the conference. Oh yes, and as Councillor Chenard alluded to as well, Jean and I were in the closing plenary, and the CEO of the Federation of Canadian Municipalities is speaking and does a shout out to this community. Then Edson, like, so we didn't say anything, we didn't cheer. And then she starts talking about the shelter pods and how it's recognized at a federal level for the initiative this community had made to try to combat homelessness. So here we are in the room, like, maybe we should scream.
I thought it was maybe the guy giving.
Like we were confused, like, why are they mentioning Edson? It was really quite confusing for us. So nonetheless,
Did you ask Gene what he said? That's the first thing that comes to what the hell did that do?
So as far as keynote speakers, it was interesting that the Prime Minister zoomed in. No surprise, but the conservative sent their leader, but they sent Andrew Scheer, who this is riding.
Yeah.
And he spoke, and his conversation, a lot of the topic was on as Councillor Chenard alluded to, was the one size shoe doesn't fit all of Canada, and it's a real challenge at all levels of government trying to blanket the country with affordable housing when what they're trying to address, affordable housing in two major centers, does not work for the rest of the country. And so those are the conversations they're trying to have at the federal level. But again, the only power we have as a municipality by attending these is trying to get the message from municipalities, because we're not opposition. The leader of the NDP leader, he showed up, he spoke.
In person.
Yeah, in person. I don't like, there was
He was bashing Trudeau.
yeah, he wasn't, but he actually had a really, what surprised me, he had a really good there was one topic in his whole speech. Most of it was spend the money, but there was a housing initiative on it. Is it the housing one?
Well, what he was saying was housing and rent control, so he was attacking, so part of my thing where it said that it doesn't fit in all areas.
Yeah, but Scheer talked about that too.
They both talked about it somewhere.
Oh, he was talking about pharmacare and dental care and all the other things and the deliverables to people at certain levels. But then there's a lot of loopholes in that. So we'll see when the irons come out of that one. But I think that and then on the side of conversations with I was talking about climate, because climate comes up even when you are just having a conversation. You're riding a bus and you're chatting with a person from somewhere, or you're at one of the receptions and you're chatting with another person from another part of the country. There's a bit of a trend that I noticed on the climate side of it, because I'm from Edson, so I always tout clean coal. I said, we could sell Alberta coal to country, knock down emissions overnight. Low sulfur coal is the best coal in the world. Japan uses it because it helps lower their emissions. We could do that overnight. That's not a solution. Why not? They just want to eliminate. I said, maybe take some steps before eliminating. They can't get rid of it because they need the power from it. So why don't we start instead of using that brown coal that produces huge sulfuric acids and huge pollution, we use a nice clean Alberta coal. And I found it a little bit disturbing as a Canadian to say, don't just denounce Alberta energy. Like we have, call it dirty if you will, but it's the cleanest of the dirty. So let's start there. And that's a message I think as a nation we need to get going. And I struggled with that one in a lot of my conversations, and because I will debate these people and say, well, we have clean coal. Edson would get really big if everybody in the country started using Alberta coal, but it's just one of those things that I sometimes take a bit of a step back. And the dynamics of the whole conference has changed, and it was definitely different. So Regina put on a good conference. They struggled with their shuttling, but other than that, it was a well-attended conference for a conference that hadn't been held in person in several years. So can't think if I'm missing something. I thought I had something else.
We gotta save something for Mr. Moore.
Well, Ed has more too. We told Ed he needed to give us a 15-page report. So
As a reporter, you probably would.
he laughed at us. He didn't believe us at all.
That's good.
Trying to catch a plane with Ed was fun. Come on, guys, let's go. Push to an edge.
Come on, Dad.
On behalf of council, we thank you for babysitting.
Thank you, Council. You made it there backstage.
I didn't see anything on Twitter, so.
He has to hold my hand because I was getting blown away. Like their slight breeze at 80 to 90 kilometer/hour gust. Like,
It's windy there. Yeah, very windy. So that is my report.
Oh, thank you,
Any
gentlemen.
questions?
Any questions from anybody?
Thanks for that presentation. It's good to hear the you know, the off the record tour that you did. That I think that'll be very helpful at the steering committee level, and yeah, climate's centered everything now.
Okay, moving on. Question from media and public regarding items from committee of the whole. Miss Adrian.
Okay, thanks.
You're good.
if you talk, watch it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on. No closed session.
Motion for adjournment.
Motion adjournment.
Everyone vote against
Yes,
it.
I have to turn the thing so these guys.
So he knows who you are. Oh, no, don't turn that one. He's got
Yeah.
some more.
I could say Mr. Moore, but all in favor? Opposed?
Indirect.